Let's talk about how to make a dot plot in Excel. So the first thing we need to do is look at what we're interested in and put that on a fresh sheet. And we have to make a special column in order to count what goes in the dot plot. So I'm going to copy this formula into that sheet, and we'll see what that looks like. So let's see. So in this example, we're going to use Women's Pulse. So I'm going to grab my data for Women's Pulse, click on the E with the black arrow to highlight the whole thing, click Control C to copy it, get my dancing dotted line to copy. I'm going to move to Sheet 2, and I'll rename Sheet 2 by double-clicking on the Sheet 2 Women's Pulse. Okay. Now I'm going to copy that into cell A1 by clicking in A1 and going Control V. And there's that data that I'm interested in. Now, let's think about what a dot plot is. A dot plot, we are counting each time I see a 76, I add a dot under 76. So I got to get Excel to do that counting for me. So I need to type this formula right here, the count if, and then $, A2, comma A2. And I'm going to talk to you about what that formula means in just a second. Let's first, let's put it in and see what happens. So I just type the word count if, and then $2, colon. Notice when I typed in the A2, it turned blue and highlighted the cell A2. I'm telling Excel to reference that cell. Excuse me, when I put the colon, I'm telling it start there and end on A2 also. A2. So I know that formula doesn't make sense yet, but let's look at what it does first, and then we'll talk about how it's telling Excel to do that. So put that formula in there. And then I want to drag this formula down and fill up so it's a column next to the Women's Pulse. So I'm going to see this little square right here. I'm going to grab that by when I hover my cursor over, I get a little black crossbar, and that means it's ready to drag. So now I click and drag down, and see that green bar? That means the green box outline. That's telling me that it's copying the formula down to all these other cells. And I want it to be the same length as the other column, so I'll end it there. And now I have all these numbers filled in from this formula. This formula also is going to need a heading on the column heading, so let's call this dot plot count. Okay, so now what this formula is doing is counting how many times we've seen this number so far. So right here, I'm saying how many times count 76 up to this point. So there's one so far. Count the number of 72s up to this point. There's one so far. Count the number of 88s up to this point. There's one. Count the number of 60s. There's one. Now I got 72. Again, this is the second time I'm getting a 72 in my list. There's one here, and now there's one here. The second time I get it, that formula gives me a 2. So that tells me I do my second dot. Now if I keep going down, I get 72 again right here on line 15. That's the third time 72 appears. So that formula gives me a 3. So it's counting the number of times each number appears in the list up to that point in the list. So each one of these points represents one of the dots on our dot plots. When I get to here, I get the first dot, that's at 72, then I get the second dot, then I get the third dot. Now this formula is count if. That means it's counting if I have a certain criteria. And if I click on the formula, you can see it says count if, and it tells me the format of this code. It says count if, and range means where do you want me to look? And then criteria means what do you want me to look for? So I'm telling Excel, I want you to count if, look in that blue range, everything before this cell of that at line 15, and look to see if you can find the thing that is in cell A15. So I'm looking according to on this particular cell, I'm looking in all this blue stuff, A2 to A15, and seeing how many times 72 appears. So the result is that it gives me the first time 72 appears, the second time 72 appears, and the third time 72 appears, the fourth time, and I can keep going, the fifth time. It does this for all the numbers in our list here. So that's our formula. So the dollar sign, what that's doing for me is showing me, telling the formula when I did that drag, did you notice that all these numbers changed? So here I have my formula is A2, A2, A2. But if I go down a cell, now it's A2, A3, A3. Then it's A4, A4, and A5, A5. The cells that do not have the dollar sign are changing. The dollar sign, it means constant. So even though I want you to change how far down the list you look, I want you always to start at cell A2. So that's that formula in Excel. And you're not responsible for explaining or being able to produce that formula, but you can memorize this formula or just use it in your notes and know that to make a dot plot, you need that formula in the cell next to your data, and then you can drag it down. So you can remember that procedure if you prefer. Okay, so that's our formula for dot plot. So now to make our actual dot plot. So remember with dot plots, every time you see a value, you add a dot to the plot. So now that I have the dot plot counts, I can do that. So now I click click on A and B to highlight both those columns. And I'm going to go Insert. And then I'm going to do a scatter plot. Now a scatter plot and a dot plot are different things. But if I do a scatter plot with this dot plot count, then I'm going to get a dot plot. So I'm going to select scatter plot, and I hopefully will get this. If your Excel defaults to something else, make sure you're choosing if it gives you options, it might give you options. Hang on, let me do that again. So sometimes it's not the first one that comes up, in which case you might have to hit more scatter charts. So highlight these again, Insert Charts. If it's the first one that comes up, great. If not, you might have to click here. And what you're looking for is a scatter plot that will take X, Y scatter. So it's taking both columns A and B. And the result is this right here where you have, here's some things to look for. You have, oops, I did it twice now. You have the count, the number of times each data point showed up in the data, and what the data points are on the vertical axis. So the horizontal axis is frequency of that particular value in the data set, count, whatever you prefer to call it. And then the vertical axis is the values in the data set. So So for example, let's see, we looked at 72 before, and we counted, let's see, that 72, 1, that is right, let's see, it's in here somewhere, right there. And then 72, 2, this one right here in column in row 6, that dot came up right here. And then 72, the third one is right there. And then the fourth one is right there. And then the fifth one, and the sixth one, and the seventh one, and the eighth one. We had 72 is listed on this list 8 times, so we get 8 dots. So there's the first one, second one, third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, the sixth one, the seventh one, the eighth one, and that is it. So each one of those 8 points of 72 is showing up as a dot on this plot. So that's what this dot plot is showing a count of each value. So I can see on this that I had 60 in this list 3 times. I had, let's see, 64 in this list 4 times. I have 68 in this list 1, 2, 3, 5 times, and so on. So that's what a dot plot's doing for us. So let me summarize the process of making the dot plot. I did a lot of explaining of what this formula is doing. Again, you're not responsible for being able to reproduce that. I just want you to know why we're doing it. But what you are responsible for is making the dot plot. So here's that process. You make the table by bringing the column of interest to a new sheet. Then we got to make a column B where it has a title. It has to have a title or it's going to mess up your chart. And then this formula, this COUNTIF formula. And you can copy that formula. If you always use rows A and B like this, then you can copy that formula exactly. And then you have to copy that formula by using this drag tool to fill in the rest of the row all the way to the end of the data set. And that was step 1. And then in step 2, we highlight both of these. Whoops, sorry. Highlight both of the, highlight A and B and insert scatter plot, and that gives us our dot plot. The only thing else you need to know is if you don't get that scatter plot as the first option, then you might have to go to more scatter plots and find the XY scatter. And that will give you that dot plot. So it should look like this, where you don't have scatters everywhere, because a dot plot's not really a scatter plot. It's every value starts at 1, because we're counting. So if there's only 124 in the data set, then it's only going to have 1 dot, and that's going to appear at the frequency of 1. So you're not going to have loosey-goosey dots all over the place. It's going to be much more structured, where every column starts at 1. Okay, so that's dot plots.